Now, the second keynote speaker is Mr. Jongho, Security Tech Team Leader at Viva, Republica, and his presentation is titled Red Teaming with White Hackers. Please welcome him to the stage with a round of applause. Good morning. My name is Jongho from TOS team. Thank you very much for inviting me to the International Conference on Information Security, and I would like to also welcome everybody to this conference. The presentation is titled Red Teaming with White Hackers. As a white hacker myself, I'd like to share with you the current trend in the information security landscape and what significance red teaming has for the industry. So a few facts about myself. I have been working for many years in the offensive security industry, and right now I'm leading the security tech team at TOS. I'm a white hacker who has been placed #1 in various international hacking defense competition, including DEF CON, which is known as the top competition in the world, and currently I'm the senior mentor of BOB, the Next Generation Security Leader Incubation Program. So first off, let me walk you through the current landscape of IT technology trend and cyber threats and why and how we should conduct red teaming. We are living in a world where IT technologies are advancing rapidly every day. From the attacker's point of view, there are three big changes to take advantage. First is digital transformation. Due to the evolution of IoT and new ICT technologies as well as hardware, everything around us, including the RTOS of the past and those that used to be separated from the network, are now computers on their own and all connected through network. Secondly, after the pandemic, the non-contact way of working has arrived faster than expected. Now that people are working from home, big changes happen to the infrastructure and communication methods inside a company. And due to the technological advancements, such convenient systems as platforms, framework, cloud have been boosted quite a lot. And of course, there are new types of security threats emerging according to such technology changes. Let me go through each of them. Firstly, the digital transformation. The graph on the right shows the number of active IoT devices since 2010 and expectation by 2025. As you can see, the number is growing rapidly every year. As each of these devices is essentially a computer, now the hackers occupy these devices and use them for coin mining and such. Next is security threats emerging due to non-contact trend. There are more and more attacks on the remote working solutions these days. If one attacks the solution like VPN, one can acquire the internal access rights relatively easily. Once the access is granted, one can abuse that for dark web without the need of a direct attack and collect account information by social engineering and get inside and leak personal information, and such secondary attack becomes possible. Lastly, the security threats due to advancement of IT. The open source framework and clouds have their own innate vulnerabilities or attack vectors. And as you see in the graph on the right side, there's a rise in the number of problems each open source or framework needs to address in terms of technology and management. Hackers carry out attacks with various objectives, and they will employ all the means possible to achieve that. So, as the technology develops, hackers' attacks also develops to target these technologies. For example, we see a dramatic rise in the number of encrypted threat attacks to bypass the system that detects and defends against hacking activities. As the technology advances, hacking threats also rise, and with this, the defense system also advances. But hackers are also upgrading their attacks to bypass the defense by employing new techniques. Ministry of Science and ICT and KISA have identified the following 6 as this year's top cyber threats. As a white hacker, I'm mostly concerned about the fact that as a new technology emerges, the attack becomes customized to the specific features of that technology, which makes the threat even more dangerous. To make a smart home or smart city, a free communication among IoT devices has become a must. And new communication technologies such as Zigbee and Z-Wave emerge, and the enabling features are installed in each device by default. Hackers take advantage of this and occupy one IoT device and then spread the attack to other connected devices. As you can see, their attacks are evolving rapidly, adapting to the fast-changing IT environment. Another example is cloud, which has become essential for many companies. AWS, Azure, and Google are the big three, and each platform has its own unique features. Hackers are quickly analyzing new platforms, exploiting unique functions, and using them as attack vectors, penetrating into the company or leaking important information such as customer information. The following case is the vulnerabilities that occurred in Spring Java framework, which has become a huge issue lately. There are many attacks that exploit the one-day, zero-day vulnerabilities that arise from the inherent functionality of the framework used by many companies. And the trend is clear. As the technologies advance, attacks also evolve. In the past, most attacks were targeting web service, but now there are more and more attacks that exploit the vulnerabilities of the framework itself. Vulnerability types also changed. It used to be caused by requests from unusual payloads, but now attacks can happen with normal requests, requiring more sophisticated methods to detect and defend. In addition, in the past, the objective of attack was to steal personal or financial information, but now, with the booming coin market, there are more and more attacks being carried out for direct financial gains, such as coin mining and ransomware. There are three major trends I see these days. There is a rising number of APT attacks exploiting COVID-19 situation, which has been a big issue over the past few years, especially targeting those with a high authorization level, such as security and IT managers. And we keep seeing vulnerabilities in the products that are supposed to be for bolstering security. Finally, as mentioned earlier, attacks through normal access that are not detected are increasing. As IT technology advances, attacks are becoming more sophisticated, and the security ecosystem needs strategies. Currently, many companies continue their security activities by complying with information security laws, regulations, and compliance. This is actually the bare minimum, and these measures are usually common measures universal to all companies. So far, I've talked about the current state of security threats and the changes in attacks as technology evolves. The key takeaway here is that it is necessary to establish a security system that reflects the situation of each company. One of the strategies to solve this problem is that, as I have been working as a white hacker for many years and conducting red teaming within the team, I'd like to share my experiences and examples where I have found them effective in improving security. Red teaming is a concept originated from the U.S. military simulation exercise in which the allies are called the blue team and the virtual enemy, the red team. In security, this is essentially attacking vulnerabilities and working to find and address ways to improve them. For many years, I have conducted the red teaming in three big phases, as you can see here. We try a variety of situations to predict situations through simulations, drive vulnerabilities, and reanalyze strategies. We then devise a ripple effect on vulnerabilities and an attack scenario, proposing a new alternative to the most efficient way to addressing them. The TOS team's hacker chapter consists of 16 white hackers, including myself, and is conducting red teaming not only for TOS core, but also for the entire community. In addition to red teaming, we also work on improving the security of TOS services, including internalization of the security technologies, responding to vulnerabilities, and raising security awareness. It is a team that advances security by conducting creative research and experimenting with high autonomy and responsibility in accordance with the tendency of white hackers. This diagram shows the main tasks of red teaming in our team. These are the 4 parts. Hacking simulation includes proactively identifying and removing vulnerabilities, internal penetration exploit, and web app service hacking simulation. The diagnostic field eliminates the security threats that can occur in the infrastructure or server itself and performs periodic diagnostic based on compliance
무한
standards.
내재화를 위해 제품 설계
And
단계부터
for
무한의
security
고량 개발이
internalization, we
여러
collaborate with
팀과
different
협업하고
teams to
있습니다.
ensure that development is done and security
Security
in mind.
hardening 자체적으로
Security
앱과
hardening
솔루션과
develops its
안티바이러스,
own app security solution, antivirus, and using detection system, increasing the cost of attacks and improves the security of services.
그 외에도 신규 취약점에
In
대한
addition,
빠른
we are
파악과
working on
대응, 외부
intelligence
네트워크에
to
노출된
quickly
자산
identify and
식별을 위해
respond to new
인텔리전스
vulnerabilities and
업무를
identify
진행하고
assets exposed to external networks.
모이해킹의 경우
Hacking simulation is the
레드
most basic activity of red teaming, mainly for web and app
수행합니다.
services.
주어진 정보 없이
There is the
실제
black
해킹과
box
유사하게
test similar to
진행되는
actual
블랙박스
hacking
테스트를
without
진행하고
any given
코드와
information,
내부
and there's the
구조를
white
보면서
box
진행하는
test,
화이트박스
which
테스트가
means we will
있습니다.
be looking at the code
그리고
and internal
대전에는
structure.
주요
In addition,
정보를
there is a
분석해서
gray box
모이해킹을
test
수행하는
where we perform
그레이 박스
hacking
테스트 방식도
simulation
있습니다.
while the account
서비스
or key
대상이
information is
아니더라도
provided.
인터넷망에서
Even if
내부
it's not
업무망,
subject to service,
태생으로
internal
접근할 수
penetration
있는
tests
내부
and
침투
scenario-based
테스트,
IPT
시나리오
tests are
기반의
performed
APT
to ensure the
등을
security of
수행합니다.
access from the internet to the
모이해킹을
internal
지속적으로
business network,
진행하면 내
closed
외부적
network, and
안점에서
ECT.
공격을 통해 취약점을
A
찾아내면서
periodic hacking
적절한
simulation
방어 체계가
allows you
구축되어
to
있는지,
identify
올바른
vulnerabilities from an
지정
internal,
준수가 있는지
external
확인할 수 있습니다.
perspectives while ensuring that the proper defense is
다음은
in
내부
place and
모의
that
훈련을
security regulations
설명드리겠습니다.
are in place.
내부 인력을
Now
레드
I'd like to
팀과
go
블루
over our
팀으로
internal
역할을 나눠서
simulation
수행하고
exercise.
보통
Internal
연간 1회에서
personnel
2회
are
정도
divided
시간을
into red
정해놓고
team and blue
수행합니다.
team, usually once or
중요한 점은
twice a
내부 모의
year.
훈련이 형식적인
Importantly,
진행으로
internal
끝나지
simulation
않도록
training
의사
should be a
결정자와 책임자가 함께 협업하는 구조가 되어야
collaborative
합니다.
structure between decision
그리고
makers
사이버
and those in
킬체인이나
charge to
마이크로
ensure the
프레임워크 등을
exercise is
참고하여
not
기업
done
인프라에
for the
잘
sake of
적용할 수
exercise.
있는
It's also
방법론을 설정하는
recommended
것이
that you set
좋습니다.
up a methodology that you can apply well to your
저희 팀에서
enterprise
진행하고 있는
infrastructure.
내부 모의 훈련 방법론
This is the
중에
part
일부인데요.
of our internal
준비,
simulation
분석,
training
공격,
methodology
명령,
that we
종료,
use.
검토
In
단계를
consists the
거치며 각 단계에서
preparation,
레드 팀과
analysis,
블루 팀의
attack,
역할들이
command,
나뉘게
exit,
됩니다.
and review phases, where the roles of
각
red team
단계에서
and blue
중요한
team are
요소들만
divided.
뽑아보면
At each stage, the red
공격자
team,
관점의
with the
레드
attacker's
팀은
perspective,
원데이, 제로데이
analyzes
취약점을
the one-day,
분석하여
zero-day
공격에 활용할
vulnerabilities,
exploit
writes the
코드를
exploit
작성하고
code
공격
to
도구를
exploit for the
개발합니다.
attack and
그리고
develops an
구축된
attack
보안
tool
시스템을
and
무력화시키고
infiltrates
우회할 수 있는
through
방법들을
ways
통해
to
진출을
neutralize and
진행합니다.
bypass the built security
방어자 관점의
system.
블루 팀은
From a
알려진
defender
취약점에
perspective,
대한
the blue
공격
team
탐지 패턴을
studies attack
연구하고
detection patterns
모니터링
for known
시스템을
vulnerabilities
검토합니다.
and reviews monitoring
내부
systems.
인프라에서
They
보안
need to make
설정이
sure
잘 되어
that the
있는지,
internal
보안
infrastructure
장비와
has
로깅
good
시스템에는
security
문제가
settings
없는지도
and
확인해야
that
합니다.
your security equipment
이런
and logging
훈련들이 여러
systems
번
are fine.
반복될수록
The
보안성
more
감정은
these drills are
향상될 수
repeated,
있습니다.
the stronger the security can be.
자, 다년간
Let me now
기업
share with
취약점에
you
대한
the
연구와
learnings from
레드
my
티밍을
research
하면서
on corporate
느낀 레드 팀이 왜
vulnerabilities and why I
필요한지,
think we
그리고
need
레드
red
팀을
teaming,
더 잘 운영하기
what to
위해서는
consider to
어떤
ensure
것을
smooth
고민해야 되는지
operation of red teaming.
말씀드리겠습니다. 우선 레드 팀을
First of all,
통해서는
with red
변화하는
team,
기술에
you can
빠르게
respond
대응할 수
quickly to
있습니다.
changing technologies.
앞서
As I
설명드렸듯이
explained
최근
earlier, the
IT
recent IT
환경은 다양한
environment is
오픈소스와
structured to
프레임워크를
use
사용하는
various open
구조입니다.
sources and frameworks.
이에 대한 보안을
To ensure
위해서는
security
먼저 각
within this
프레임워크에
context, you
대한
need
이해와
to understand
업무
each
프로세스에
framework
대한
and
이해가
work
반드시
processes.
필요합니다. 프레임워크 각각이 가지고 있는
Without
고유한
understanding
특성과
the
개발
unique characteristics of
배포까지의
each
파이프라인을
framework
이해하지
and the pipeline
못하면
from development
보안적으로
to
이슈가 될 수 있는
deployment,
부분을
it is
찾아내고
impossible
대응하는
to
것이
identify
불가능합니다.
or respond to security
하이테커는
issues.
공격자의
White
관점에서
hackers find the
가장
fastest
빠른
attack
루트를
route
찾아가기
from
때문에
the attacker's
빠른
point of
기술
view,
습득력을 가지고
so you
있고
can acquire stuff
프레임워크에
fast
대한
and
이해를
can derive
바탕으로
new
새로운
attack
공격
vectors and
패턴과 취약점을
vulnerabilities
도출할
based
수
on their
있습니다.
understanding of the framework.
두 번째는 레드 팀을
Second,
통해
red team
기업
can
특화된
help you
공격
build a
방어 체계를 구축할 수
company-specific
있습니다.
attack defense
앞서 보안
framework.
생태계의
As mentioned
발전
earlier
방향성에서
about the
언급했듯이
direction of security
각 산업
ecosystem
분야마다
development,
고유한
each
IT
industry
체계를
has its
가지고
own
있고
IT
각
system,
기업마다도
and each
다른
company
IT
has its
체계를
own
가지고
IT
있습니다.
system as well.
예를 들면
For
병원에서
example, the
가장
most important
중요한
security factor in
보안에서는
hospitals
환자
is the
진료 기록에 대한
protection of
보호이고
patients' medical
금융회사에서는
records.
그에 대한
And for
금융
financial
자산과
firms, it's
가용성이라고 할
their
수 있습니다.
customers' financial assets and
그래서 각
availability.
기업에서는 가장
So each
중요한
company
자산에
is
대한
carrying out
보호를
security
1순위로 두고
activities
보안
with the
활동을
protection
하고
of its
있는데
most important
우선순위를
assets as
결정하는 데
number
있어서도
one priority,
하이테커가 좋은
and
솔루션을
white hackers
제시할
can
수
provide a
있습니다.
good solution for this
레드 팀은 각 기업 IT
prioritization.
체계를
Red
이해하고
team
이를
understands
활용한
each
공격을
enterprise
통해
IT
최선의
system
방어
and
체계를
can use
구축하는
it
데
to
기여할 수
attack
있습니다.
to help build the best possible defense system.
이런 레드 팀 활동들은
These
보통
red team
하이테커를 통해
activities are usually
진행되는데
conducted by white
하이테커가 레드 팀
hackers,
활동을 잘할
and the
수 있는
reason
이유는
is that
공격,
they're
대응,
in
보안
the
체계 구축
attacker's
모든
position
단계에서
at every
공격자
stage
입장이기
of the
때문입니다.
attack response security
해커들은
system
시스템을
establishment.
파악하고 취약점을
Hackers
분석하여
identify
가장
systems,
효율적인
analyze vulnerabilities and perform attacks in the most efficient way.
공격 이후의 단계에서
The
화이트
difference
해커는
is that
방어를
in the
목적으로
post-attack
하고
phase,
블랙
the
해커는
white
공격을
hackers
목적으로
aim
한다는
for
것이
defense and
차이점입니다.
black hackers aim for attack.
이들이 사용하는 공격
I think
방법과
white
최신
hackers have
IT
the
기술에
upper
대한
hand in their
연구에서는
research
하이테크가
on
우위에
attack
있다고
methods
생각합니다.
and the latest IT
그래서 하이테크의
technologies.
공격 정확성을
So the
통해
white
가장
hackers,
효율적인
through their
방법 또한 제시할
attackers'
수 있습니다.
perspective, can also suggest the most efficient defense
레드 팀을 더
defense
잘
methods.
운영하기 위한 세 가지
The four key
키포인트는
points to
하이테크의
ensure
역량과
a smooth
자질,
run of the red
조직 내
teaming are the
레드 팀,
capability and quality of the white hackers, the red team within the organization, and
먼저
independence.
하이테크의 역량과 자질입니다.
First, the
레드
capability
팀의
and quality
적절한
of a white
구성원은
hacker.
정보를
The red
그대로
members
받아들이는
for
사람보다는
red teaming are
비판적
those who
사고를
can do
가지고
critical
논리적이고
thinking and carry
분석적인
on
생각을
logical and
이어나가는
analytical
사람입니다.
thinking rather than those who
또한 레드
accept the
팀 운영 시
information as it is.
해커들마다
In
스페셜리스트인
addition,
분야가
each hacker
정해져
has
있고
his
고유의
or
색을 가지고
her
있기
own
때문에
specialist
리더는
field and
하이테커 개개인의
individuality,
관점을
so the leader
존중하고
must respect the
창의적인
individual
환경에서도
white
운송
hacker's point of
자율성과
view and
책임감을
help them
가지고
study
연구할 수
with
있도록
high
도와야
autonomy
합니다.
and responsibility in a creative environment.
다음은 조직 내에 레드
Next, you
팀을
must
구성해야 합니다.
organize the red team
레드 팀의
within
업무를
your
한정 짓는
organization.
것보다는
Rather than
자율성과
limiting red
책임감을
team's
통한
work,
창의적인
creative
업무가
ways of
공격과
doing
방어에
things
훨씬
through
효율적입니다.
autonomous and accountability are
따라서
much
내부
more
인프라에
effective in
대한
terms of
내부
attacking and
인프라와
defending.
시스템에 대한
Therefore,
높은
they should
이해도를
be
가질 수
in an
있는
environment that
환경이라면
allows them
올바른
to
판단을
have
위해
a
내부
high
상황과
understanding of
회사의
internal
미래
infrastructure and
방향성도
systems.
높은
And
이해도를
in
가지고
order to
있어야
make the
합니다.
right decision, they must
이를 통해서
have
문제
a good
발견 시
understanding
가장
of the internal
효율적인 해결
situation and the
방법을
future
제시할 수
direction of the
있는데요.
company.
예시로
So rather than
신규
red
시험장이
teaming with
발생했을
external
때
teams, it's more
수많은
appropriate to
자산에서
operate
해당
within the internal
시험장이
team in your
유효한지부터
organization. Through this,
조치하고
they
이행
can
점검을
suggest the
하는
most
데까지는
efficient
많은
solution
비용이
when they
발생합니다.
find a problem. For
레드
example,
팀을
when a
통해서라면
new vulnerability
시험장의
occurs, it
유효성,
costs a
악용
lot of
시나리오
money
가능성
from
등을
determining
종합적으로
whether it is valid on a
판단하여
large
가장
number of
효율적인
assets
방안으로
on
해결할 수
to
있습니다.
taking actions and doing performance checks. By red teaming, you can
마지막으로는
comprehensively
지속성과
determine this
독립성입니다. 레드 팀은 장기적인
and
목표를 가지고
the
독립적인 형태로
validity
지속되어야
of the
합니다.
vulnerabilities and the possibility
단기적인
of
성과를
exploitation
위주로 한 팀이라면
scenarios.
형식적인
Finally,
업무가 될 수 있습니다.
continuation and independence. The
지속적으로
red team must
발전하는
remain
IT 기술에 대한
independent
연구와
with
새롭게
long-term
등장하는
goals.
취약점
With a
트렌드를
team,
파악하여
if the team is
알맞은
focused on short-term
대응 체계를
performance, it
구축하기
can be
위해서는
relegated to
지속적으로
just
레드
formal
팀밍을
tasks.
수행할 수
To
있는
constantly
구조여야
develop
합니다.
IT technology and identify
또한 레드
emerging
팀밍은 하부 서밋
trends,
조직으로부터
to create a
영향력을
response
최대한
system, you need to
배제하여
have a structure in
독립성을
place that
확보한
allows you
상태에서
to
다양한
conduct red
시뮬레이션을
teaming
수행하여야
continuously.
하고
In addition,
여러
red team must
이해관계가
perform
얽히지 않은
various simulations
상태에서
with maximum
모든
independence
가능성을 고려하여
from other
취약점을
departments and
분석하고
organizations.
가장
Only that way
근본적으로
they can
이를 해결할
analyze
수 있는 방안들을
vulnerabilities by
제시할 수
considering all possibilities without being influenced by multiple interests.
내부의 팀을 구성하기는 어려우나
It's
외부자
hard to create a
관점에서
team
레드 팀의
internally,
효과를
but
얻기
you can
위해서는
leverage
버그
bug
바운티를
bounty
활용할 수
to get the
있는데요.
red team effect from
버그
an
바운티는
outside
화이트 해커가
perspective.
허용된
Bug
범위
bounty
안에서
is a
취약점을
system
찾아
in
이를
which
기업에
companies pay
제보하면
rewards
기업에서
if white
포상금을
hackers find vulnerabilities
지급하는
within the
제도입니다.
allowed range and report
애플,
them to the
구글,
company.
삼성 등
It's been
다양한
operated by
국내
various
기업과
companies
기관에서
such as
4년간
Apple,
운영
Google,
중입니다.
and Samsung for many years.
자체적으로
Some of
운영하는
them
것과
operate on their
근본
own,
또는
some
키사와
of them
협력하여
operate
운영하는 것, 버그
in
바운티
operation
플랫폼을
with
이용해 운영하는
Financial
것으로 나뉩니다.
Security Institute
버그
or
바운티로
KISA,
외부
and some of them
하이테크를
use
통해
the bug
외부자
bounty
관점에서
platform. The
취약점을
bug bounty
선제적으로
allows you
발견하여
to
이를
preemptively
제거하고
discover
방어 체계를
vulnerabilities
고도화할 수
from an
있습니다.
outsider's point of view, eliminate them, and advance your defense
지금까지
system.
최근 IT 변화와
So far, I've
그에 따른
looked
보안
at the
이슈들,
recent
이를
changes in
대응하기
IT
위한
and the
새로운 보안
related
전략
security
중 하나가
issues and
될
the
수
red
있는
teaming,
레드 팀밍에
which can
대해서
be one of the new
말씀드렸습니다.
security strategies to
국가나
respond to them.
기업, 개인을
Hackers
상대로
do
정치적,
everything they
금전적
can
목적을
to
달성하기
achieve
위해 해커들은 수단과
political
방법을
and financial
가리지 않습니다.
objectives against states,
많은
businesses, and
조직들이 이를
individuals.
대응하기
While
위해
many
제로
organizations
트러스트 등
trying to
다양한 전략을
counteract
시도하고
this by
있지만
devising various
점차
strategies,
변화하고
including
발전되는
zero
새로운
trust,
기술과
to detect and
IT
respond to
변화에
attacks that
따라서
are
새로운
constantly
보안
changing and
기술과
evolving.
생겨나고 있습니다.
I believe we need to first
이에
understand
맞는
the
공격을
attacker's
모두
position
탐지하고
and
대응하기
find
위해서는
the most
맞춤화된
efficient
보안 전략이
solution.
필요한데요. 공격자의 입장을 이해하고 가장 효율적인 방법을 찾아내는 것이 무엇보다도 우선시되어야 한다고 봅니다. 네, 경청해 주셔서 감사드립니다.
Thank you very much for listening.
맞습니다. 첫 번째 기조 강연에 이어서 두 번째 강연도 함께 하셨습니다. 비바 리퍼블리카 시큐리티 테크팀 이종호 리더님께서 이 최신 IT 기술부터 또 사이버 위협의 동향 그리고 화이트 해커가 레드팀 활동을 수행하는 내용까지 자세하게 소개를 해주셨습니다.
what kind of red hackers are doing in the space. And I believe that all of you would be very curious about the future and how things are going to change in the future, and I'm sure you have benefited from his presentation. Without further ado, let's move on to the third presentation and also the last presentation of the keynote session. And we're going to be joined by Doron Liberman, INCD Director from Israel National Cyber Directorate. Let's watch a video together.
Dear friends, thank you for having me today, joining you on the International Conference for Information Security 2022. It's a great pleasure in behalf of the INCD to be with you today, and I hope my keynote will contribute something to your world of cybersecurity, maybe a bit more to understand Israeli point of view and the way we try to defend ourselves and conduct our behavior in these hectic times. It is good that we are meeting after the Cybersecurity Week in Israel, which has just ended in the end of June. It was a very fruitful and interesting meeting of cybersecurity leaders from all around the world and professional experts, all trying to sit together in a great big event with many sideshows, trying to understand and analyze what are the current cybersecurity challenges and what are the current policies we are using. Are they sufficient, and what do we do more to make our countries safer? First of all, let me say a few words about the INCD, Israel National Cyber Directorate, since I'm sure you are not all aware of what we're doing and who we are. So in Israel, there is one agency, a civilian agency, the Israel National Cyber Directorate, which is responsible for safeguarding Israel's civilian cybersphere. Our Director General, the head of the INCD, is subjected to the Prime Minister alone, the same as the head of other intelligence agencies in the country. We are responsible for keeping Israel's civilian cybersphere clean. We are the regulator for Israel's national critical infrastructure. We are responsible to guide sectorial regulators on cybersecurity measures they should take in their own sectors. And we are in charge of protecting as much as we can and educating as much as we can the SMBs and SMEs in Israel to make everybody safe as much as possible against cyber threats. Speaking of cyber threats, this is one of the interesting changes that we are experiencing these days in Israel. We used to talk about state actors, national organizations, fully financed and motivated ideologically attacking Israel. We have the known enemies, we know them, we see them, and we are there to respond, and we are there to defend ourselves against their actions. But we are more than, we see today more than one type of national ideological opponents. Mr. Gabi Portnoy, the head of the Directorate, has said during Cyber Week that we are no longer seeing one shade of color red, we are seeing 50 shades of red. Our enemies are changing their shape and structure. We have more and more cyber crimes and proxies. We have more and more independent attackers and unknown organizations who are acting sometimes alone, but sometimes in behalf of state actors. So the array of enemies is expanding, and we see them more active than we've seen them before. We are not competing with anybody, but I can tell you that Israel is facing hundreds of cyber attacks every month. Different sizes, different scale. We see what we're facing, and we're doing our best to protect ourselves. It's true that sometimes the media is overemphasizing the events, but this is part of the psychological warfare that comes along with the cyber attacks themselves. We are in a time of change. We have seen and heard leaders from all around the world saying so during Cyber Week in Israel. Some of them say we are in between paradigms. Some of them say we are in the AI era or entering the AI era. Some of them raise the question of what will be the relationship between man and machine in 10, 20, and 30 years, and are we adjusting ourselves correctly to the emerging challenge? We should see and look into our different courses of action when we talk about dealing with the cyber challenges. First of all, in Israel, as I said, we change our perception. We are no longer looking only from the red side of the enemies to the blue side of our assets. We are looking more into what's going on within our assets themselves. And the more we look, the more different enemies we see in front of us. And this makes us think about how we can protect ourselves from them, learn more about them, and develop new mechanisms to deal with them. One of the changes we're making is widening our scope of responsibility. In the last 3-4 years, we focused a lot on Israel critical infrastructure because we identified certain organizations or systems within organizations which we thought are critical to Israel governance, to Israel ability to stand safe and strong. By doing so, we have raised their resilience and robustness, and we're very happy about it. But looking from the blue side and looking on the attack surface and examining the gap that is growing between the rapid digitation of our societies and the slow reaction of our country regulatory systems or patching mechanisms, we understand that we need to do more to protect the rest of the sectors. This is why we have changed a bit our perception, and we're going to widen our approach from the INCD, from our General Directorate, towards the sectorial regulators. We intend to do a lot more and get a lot more organizations within the sectors cybersecurity. We have methodologies and tools we have developed to protect our critical infrastructure, and now our aim is to share more of them with organizations within the sectors. The sectorial regulators will still be the one leading this operation, and the responsibility will always lie first in the organizations themselves. But as the INCD, we intend to take a much more prominent role in copying methodologies and systems, tools and knowledge from the way we protect it, and will keep protecting our critical infrastructure to some more relevant top organizations which each sectorial regulator will decide are important to their own sector. Another important aspect that we intend to intensify is our dialogue with other services around the world when it comes to threat intelligence. I'm sure that, like myself, you have participated in a lot of international conferences, online and offline, in the past 3 years. We have been talking a lot about cooperation and the need to cooperate in the world of cybersecurity, because the beats know no borders, and digital sovereignty is still something that needs to be defined. So we all know the importance of cooperating, but we need to take a step further than cooperating and start working really together, start really working and analyzing and countering cyber attacks together as joint teams. Not only wait for everything to change or for the event to end and then to update our colleagues. We need to make sure that we identify the threats, even early signs of threat, and then share them with our partners to see maybe they can contribute from their knowledge to us. It is always a challenge for professionals to share information or thoughts when they are not completely sure if it is a cyber attack, who's the attacker, and what's going on. Nevertheless, we have to overcome this obstacle and understand that sometimes we're going to get information that is not 100% sure, but those early signs could be very useful when it comes to protecting our assets, mainly our critical assets, in advance. The other course of action we intend to follow is asking ourselves, what can the government do more? What can the government do more to protect its citizens, its SMBs, its SMEs? We know they are the weakest link in the chain. Some of them have cybersecurity knowledge, some of them don't have cybersecurity knowledge at all. So even if we as governments issue warnings or letters of information, IOCs, or best practices to the market, sometimes at the other end, organizations and companies do not really know what to do with it. This is something that we have to take into consideration. And while doing it, we are trying to develop a more intensive governmental operation in this behalf. We are considering a few courses of action. The first one is the question regarding how deep can a government intervene when it sees an immediate threat. Sometimes all the law permits us is to inform the jeopardized organization that it is vulnerable and recommend it takes actions. But what if they don't? And what if we consider that if harm is caused to them, then private information would be leaked? What if we as the INCD think that if they are jeopardized because they were incompetent or did not follow a recommendation, Israel's information would leak, and harm could be caused to them or to Israeli infrastructure, even if it's not considered critical? How far can we go to force them to do so? This is something that legislation needs to answer, and we're examining it very carefully with countries around the world who have taken already measures to describe what can the government do, and how far it can go. Another course of action is more operative one. We are trying to define a new zone in cyber, which we consider to be the perimeter of the Israeli civilian cybersphere. This perimeter is the Israeli internet sphere, or sometimes even of international providers, or sometimes the global internet, but it has to do directly with the Israeli assets. We think we should provide Israeli companies and enterprises the capabilities to defend themselves from harm from this sphere. We intend to provide SMBs and SMEs tools to examine how vulnerable they are, how are they jeopardized, and propose to them new courses of action on how to protect themselves should they prefer to do it. At the same time, monitoring this civilian sphere, monitoring the perimeter of the Israeli space, we think we should and could promote more activity as a government towards the internet service providers, towards international vendors, toward leading vendors in Israel, asking their cooperation in protecting hazardous activity, in protecting malware attacks, in protecting against vulnerabilities, exploits, before the enemies really materialize them, weaponize them, and use them against our constituents. This government approach is a more active one to defend mostly the SMBs and SMEs in parallel to our protection of our critical infrastructure and prominent organizations within sectors. We believe this is a more holistic approach, at least a wider approach that we have tried so far, and we hope it will bring more cybersecurity to the constituents themselves. I don't know if it's last or first, but we are talking about cybersecurity, we're talking about digitation, we're talking about AI, but behind all this, and maybe in front of this, are people. People who design, people who build those technologies, and people who, at the end of the chain, need to protect our organization and citizens from the same technologies when they meet them in the field, when they meet them in the IoT, when they meet them in the servers and computers and systems and technologies they use on a day-to-day basis. People are a resource we are in shortage of. Even being a cyber nation and being a cyber leader in cybersecurity technologies, and maybe because of it, Israel is still the same as every country in the world in shortage of manpower, people to patch, people to safeguard, people to develop, and people to innovate. As government, we can do a lot of things to assist this ecosystem of capacity building, human capacity building, to grow stronger. We're trying to do so with colleagues around the world. We try to do so with colleagues within the Israeli governments. We try to think of ways to incentivize, to run projects together with our sister ministries in Israel: education, welfare, economics, innovation, rural affairs. We're trying to work towards minorities, As a government agency, leading government agency for cybersecurity, we have programs all across the field. We work with primary school, high schools, with military recruits, with post-military service personnel. We work with our academies. We have in Israel 8 research centers in 8 universities to promote cyber research in academic level, to invest in the future, to see what is coming ahead in several aspects of cyber. Cryptography, legislation, innovation, security, and all kind of other research that those universities see fit. This is a multi-year and multi-approach challenge, but we, as you, understand the need of this, and the more digitized the world will be, the more cyber security needs are going to be, and the more people we will have to cope with that. To summarize what I said, I have to say that cybersecurity is fascinating. We have just been through Cyber Week in Israel. We had delegations from 50 countries. We had experts from all range of cybersecurity, from maritime to aviation to ICIS, OT, IT, legislation. Very, very fruitful discussion. Very interesting and endless field where you can only find more and more questions and challenges and more opportunity to create solutions. This is why it's so fascinating. But we also learn every day that cybersecurity cannot be done alone. We are doing it with some of our colleagues in South Korea. We are doing it with colleagues all around the world. This is one of the biggest mission of our agency and our biggest challenge for the coming future. Not just cooperate, but really work together. Let's challenge those attackers. Let's show them that we are a stronger network than the network that they can build. We should cooperate in threat intelligence. We should run joint investigation. We should share methodologies and tools that we have already created to ourselves, instead of investing wasted resources if somebody already did it. Let's share tools. Let's share experience. Let's build joint working teams to work together on current and future challenges. This is the mission ahead of us, and this is what we in the INCD intend to promote. I hope we all meet physically soon. I invite you to Israel to see and learn from our ecosystem. We know we have a lot to learn from your ecosystem. We are in contact, I think, with the right people to get ahead on this. And I know that working together with you, with your country, will make us better. I hope it could also help you. And in this notion of cooperation, I wish you all a very good seminar, contributing and interesting. Thank you again for having me. It was a pleasure being with you. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was the presentation by Mr. Doron Liberman on changing attack vectors, human capacity building, and international cooperation. It was a presentation by Israeli International Cooperation Development Bureau from Israel. Thank you very much once again for your kind and informative words. Let's wrap the first keynote session. Please enjoy your short break, and we will split up to 3 different tracks. Where you're sitting down is track B, where I am on URN, and if you turn to your right, that's track C, and if you turn to your left, that's track A. Please check the themes and the titles of presentations to see which you would be interested in and choose your location. And we will allow your entrance from 11:30 a.m. At track A, we are going to talk about digital data security of the digital platform era. And at track B, it'll be government security policy, and at track C, it'll be privacy information protection. You can also utilize your phone to scan a QR code in front of the hallway so that you can download relevant presentation materials. And we also have set up 17 promotional booths in the corridor and also in the lobby, and there will be many experiential zones where you can check out different security products. Please enjoy your coffee and refreshments in the lobby. Check out the booths, and then I'll see you again at 11:30 a.m. And let me make an announcement once again later. Thank you, and see you again.
자, 여러분 다시 공지 드리도록 하겠습니다. 여러분들이 위치하고 계신
One more time.
제가 위치하고 있는 곳이 B트랙이고요.
So right now we are on the track B, and to my right that's track A, and to my left that's track C. So please follow the direction. And once again, the simultaneous interpretation is being serviced. Please make sure that you will be wearing the receiver. For A track, number 1 and 2 are for Korean and English. Track B, that's 3 and 4 for Korean English, and in track C, 5 and 6 for Korean and English.
네, 여러분 편안한 휴식 시간 되셨습니까?
I hope you had a good rest during your break. We would now like to begin track B.
안내해드린 대로 비트랙
As we said
세션의
earlier,
주제는
the topic
정보보안
of track
전체기
B is
되겠는데요.
public sector
이 비트랙 첫 번째
cybersecurity.
세션의 좌장을 맡아주실
So
분은
the
손승우
moderator of the first
원장님이십니다.
section
손승우
track
원장님께서는
B
현재
is Mr. Son Sung-woo,
방위산업기술보호위원회
President of Korea
위원,
Institute of Intellectual Property.
군사안보지원사령부,
He's currently a member of the Defense Industry Technology Protection Committee, of the Military Security Advisory Committee of the Defense Security Support Command,
현재
and Industrial Technology Dispute
한국지식재산연구원
Mediation Committee.
원장으로 재임 중에
He's also the
있습니다.
president of the Korea
자장을
Institute of
맡아주실
Intellectual Property. Now we
한국지식재산연구원
would like to
손승우
invite
원장님
Mr.
무대에
Son
자리하셨는데요.
Sung-woo.
여러분 큰 박수로 환영해 주십시오.
He is up on stage already. Please give him a big round of applause.
네, 반갑습니다.
Good morning. As introduced, my name is Son Sung-woo. I'm the president of KIIP.
정보보호의 날.
Now, today marks the 11th Information Security Day. We're having a conference to commemorate that day, and we are in track B right now. And we would like to take a look at the government's policy on cybersecurity, together with presentations by two presenters, and then this will be followed by a Q&A session. So all across society, digital transformation is happening. And we are actually going beyond digital so as to encompass not just products and services, but also include R&D and various processes and procedures. Everything is become data, everything is become digital. And this change is occurring very rapidly. So companies would have to conduct open R&D and have to engage in collaboration. And against this backdrop, data leakage becomes a big risk. Therefore, the issue of data security is becoming ever more important. So we have two presenters from public institutions to listen to the government's related policies. Now, with the topic of development strategies for key technologies for data security, we will hear from Mr. Hyuncheol, Program Manager for Cybersecurity and Blockchain from the Institute of Information and Communications Technology Planning and Evaluation. And as I said before, he's a Program Manager for Cybersecurity and Blockchain. Mr. Jeong, I will give you about 25 minutes for your presentation, and then we will take 2 to 3 questions after your presentation. Thank you.
네, 반갑습니다.
It's very nice to meet you.
정보통신기획평가원의 보안 블록체인 PM을
As
맡고 있는
introduced, my name is
정현철이라고
Jeong.
합니다.
I'm the PM for Cybersecurity and Blockchain at IITP.
박수로 좀 맞아주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Can you give him a big round of applause? Thank you very much.
제가 소개드릴 내용은 데이터
So
보호
what I'd
핵심
like
기술
to
개발
tell you
전략이라고 해서
today
작년
is strategies to
11월달에
develop core data protection
정보보호에서
technologies for safe
전략을
data
발표한 내용이 있습니다.
economy, and it's
이
in
전략에
line with
대해서
the policies
소개를
that were announced by the
드리고 앞서
MSIT
이제
last
디지털
year.
트랜스포메이션에
And
대해서
the moderator
계속
mentioned
기조에서도
about
많은
digital
분들이
transformation.
주셨고
This was also mentioned in the
핵심은
keynote
이제
address.
데이터에 있는 것
And the
같습니다.
key is in
데이터를 어떻게
data.
활용하느냐가
How are we going to
기업이나 국가의
utilize
이제
data
경쟁력이 될 수가 있을 것 같은데
is going to determine the
데이터를 활용할
competitiveness
때는
of our companies
당연히
and
이제
our countries. And issues such as privacy also need to be considered when we use data. So in order to protect data, we would have to come up with some strategies for technology development. I would like to go into that now.
말씀드릴 순서는 이렇게인데요.
So
우선 이제
this is the
데이터를
order of
바라보는
my
시각들이
presentation. So the
기업이
way
바라보는
we view
데이터와
data is
개인이
different
바라보는
between
데이터는
corporates
많은
and
차이가 있는 것
individuals.
같습니다.
A
그래서
big
그
difference, as a
차이를
matter of fact.
간략히 한번
So I would
보고
like to touch
그리고
upon the
실제 이제
differences
이 데이터를 보호하기
and
위한 어떤
also
전략들에
go
대해서
into some strategies
말씀드리도록
that we
하겠습니다.
are implementing in order to protect data.
먼저 기업이 바라보는 데이터입니다.
Now,
지금 이제 이
let's talk about
기사가
data from the
캠브리지
perspective of
애널리티카
companies.
R&D라는 이제 사이트에서
So this
이제 가져온
is
그
a graph
기사인데요.
or an article from
여기에도
CambridgeRad.com.
지금 pay attention.
And the title is Pay Attention, Tesla is not a car company.
자동차 회사냐?
So is Tesla really a car company? No, the article says.
실제 이제 여기에 보시는 게 이제 코드
So what you're
수입니다.
seeing is the numbers of
코드
codes or
수, 소프트웨어인데
lines
코드
of codes.
수인데 실제
within a software.
윈도우즈가 한
And if you
5천만
look at
라인보다
Windows,
안 되죠. 근데
there is less
자동차
than
같은
500,000.
경우는
But
이제 1억
Oh, I'm
라인
sorry, less than 50
넘어가고
million.
있습니다. 실제
However,
이제
car
일반적으로
software
평균적인
has
자동차가
more line of codes
소프트웨어
than Windows,
코드가
around
한 1억 5천만 라인
150
정도
million.
된다고 합니다. 이 정도면은 테슬라가 자동차 회사가 아니라
So we
소프트웨어
can
회사나
basically say that Tesla is not a car
아니면
company,
데이터
but a
회사가
software
아닌가
or a
이제
data
생각이
company.
듭니다.
I think it's safe
실제
to say that based on this
자동차를 최근에
graph.
이제 보시면은
So if you look at these cars that are being
앞서
recently
말씀드린 바와
launched,
같이 이제 소프트웨어가 굉장히 이제 거의 대부분의 많은 기능들이
they are
소프트웨어되어
equipped
있다라는
with
부분이
softwares
있습니다.
with various
보안
functions.
관점에서 한번 생각을
But let's think of them
해보면은
from
이
a perspective of
소프트웨어되면은
security.
복잡도가 증가하고
If software is installed into the car, the complexity arises, and that also leads to vulnerability increasing.
그 소프트웨어 코드 1000라인에 이제 한 개
So
정도의
1,000 lines
버그가
of
있고
code
취약점이
in
있다라고
software
얘기하고
has a
보수적으로도
bug,
이제
they
3만 라인에
say,
하나
usually.
정도는
And
반드시 있다라고 얘기를 하고
conservatively
있습니다.
speaking, they say that there's always a bug within
1억
about
5천만
30,000 lines of
라인에도
code.
많은 이제 보안 취약점들이
So of
존재할
course,
수밖에
given
없겠죠.
that
또
there
이제
is
하나는 이제
about
초연결
150 million lines of
화되고
code inside an
있다라고
average
이제
car,
볼
there
수가
should
있을
be a
것
lot of
같습니다.
vulnerabilities.
자동차 같은 경우도 여러 이제 인포테인먼트 시스템들이 이제
And
도입이
a
되고
lot of
있고
infotainment systems are being
모바일만큼만 아니라
introduced in
지금
cars
와이파이라든지
right now, not just
블루투스라든지
network,
많은
but
방들이
Wi-Fi
연결이 되고
and
또
Bluetooth
이제
and other types of network as well.
여러 이제 센서들과도 이제 통신을 하고 있습니다.
These cars
이렇게 이제
communicate
여러
with
어떤
sensors.
연결성이 증가하게
So
되면은
when there is an
텍스페이스가
increase
당연히
in
이제 증가할 수밖에
connectivity,
없겠죠.
attack surface
그리고
inevitably increases.
마지막이 이제 데이터화인데요. 이렇게 이제
And
소프트웨어화되고
next I would like to
있는
talk about
이유는
datafication.
결국은 이제
The
데이터를
reason why
수집하고
various
데이터를
softwares are
활용하기
being
위한
installed
목적이
inside cars is
아닌가
to collect and
싶습니다.
use data.
이 테슬라에도 많은 어떤 디지털 정보들이
Tesla
수집되고 이를
has been
기반으로
collecting
또
many
다른
digital data or
부가가치를
information in
생성을
order
하고
to
있는 것
create
같습니다.
added value.
근데 이렇게 이제 데이터화가 되면은 당연히 이제
with
프라이버시
datafication,
이슈가 발생이
There
될 수밖에
inevitably comes
없는 것
privacy
같습니다.
issues.
그래서 이 프라이버시 이슈를 이제 줄이기 위해서 지금
So
이제
in order to decrease privacy issues, many measures are being taken
데이터는 이제
today.
기업의 어떤 경쟁력의 필수 요소라고
So data is
할 수 있는데
essential in raising the competitiveness of a company, but
관건이라고 할 수가 있을
tackling
것
the issue
같아요.
of privacy is really the
이거는
key.
올 3월 달에
Now, in
인공지능 산업
March this
청사진이라고
year,
해서
the Korean
12개
government
산업
announced a
분야에서
blueprint
인공지능을
for
도입하는데
AI
어떤
policy,
애로사항이
and they
있느냐라는 것을
talked
이제
about
물어본
the problems that come with
내용들입니다.
applying AI into 12
많은
industries
산업들이 뭐
that
비슷할
it
겁니다. 비슷할 텐데 이제
talked about,
정보보호
and I think the problem is
쪽에서도
basically similar across all
지금 이제
industries.
크게 두 가지 이슈들을
Now, there
얘기를
are
하는 것
mainly two
같습니다.
big issues that is the talk of town these days.
첫 번째는 이제 데이터가 부족하다.
One is that
두
we lack
번째는
data, or there's
privacy
insufficient amount of data.
이슈 때문에
And two is that because
데이터를 많이
of
활용을
privacy issue,
못하겠다라는
data
이제
utilization
이슈입니다.
is not so
근데
easy.
두 개의 문제는 결국은 하나로
These
연결이
two
되는 것
problems
같아요.
actually
결국은 이제 프라이버시 이슈
are
때문에
related to each other.
데이터가
So
있다고
because
하더라도
of
이
privacy
데이터를
issue,
마음대로
even if we
활용을
have data available, we are
못한다는
not able to
게
use them
문제의 핵심이
as much
아닌가
as we want
싶습니다.
to. That's the key of the problem.
다음은 이제 개인 관점에서 바라보는
Now let's take a
데이터를
look at
한번
data from
살펴보도록
individuals'
하겠습니다.
point of view.
개인 관점에서는 지금 여기 최근에 뭐 TV 보면은 광고들을 하고
I'm sure
있죠.
you might have seen this
그
ad on TV
아이폰
recently. It's a latest
광고인데요.
iPhone ad.
이 엘리 양이라는 이제 그 소녀가 우연히 이제 방문을 열었는데
And
놀랍게도
a girl named Ellie
자기의
opens
개인
her room, and much to her
정보를 경매를
surprise,
하고 있어요.
her
내가
data or her private
웹서핑했던
information is
곳이라든지
being
내가
auctioned.
검색했던
Her web surfing
주제들,
records,
그리고
her
내가
searches,
쇼핑했던 것들, 내가
and her
방문,
shopping records,
나의 위치,
and her
뭐 이런
location,
나의
geographical location
프라이빗한
information, and so
정보들을
on.
경매를 하고 있는 거죠.
Her
굉장히
private
놀라운
information was being auctioned in a room, so she's very shocked.
사실 뭐 여러분들도 많이 이제 경험을 하셨을 수도 있을 것
Many of you
같아요.
might
내가
have experienced
어디
this already,
그,
but
여행을 가기 위해서 어디를 검색했는데
you might
그다음부터
have
거의
done
뭐
some internet or
한
online search
한두 달
to
동안은 계속
travel
그
somewhere,
여행
and
패키지 관련된
a
광고가
month or
뜨는
two
것을
later
경험을
down the
해보신
road, you
분도 계실
keep
겁니다.
seeing these messages about traveling
개인
popping up on your
데이터가
computer or your
기업들이
personal
이렇게
device.
이제 좀 부단으로 활용하는 사례들도
So companies are
종종 있는 것
actually
같습니다.
taking advantage
거기에 따라서
of
지금
our
이제
personal data in such
웹의
a way.
환경도 기존에 이제 웹
And the web
1.0에서
environment
2.0,
has changed as
3.0으로
well
하는데
from
현재
1.0 to
어떤
2.0 to 3.0.
어떤 플랫폼 기반의 웹 환경들.
And when we
지금
talk about platform-based
구글이라든지
web
페이스북이라든지
environment like
이런 많은
Google
이제
or
웹
Facebook
환경들이
that we are
웹
using
1.0에
today,
해당이
they
된다라고 이제 할
belong
수가
to
있을
Web
것 같습니다.
2.0.
근데 앞서 봤던 이제 그런 그 사례처럼 실제로 내가 이 플랫폼에서 많은 정보들을 올리고
But
공유하고
let's say that when we
하는데 이 정보는
upload and
결국은
share
이제
information
기업들이
on
자기
platforms, as I said
이익을 위해서만
before,
사용을 하고
companies
있고
take advantage
실제
of them for
개인을
their own
위해서는
profit
뭐
and
아무런
not for the
어떤
benefit
그
of the
보상이 주어지지
individuals.
않는
There are
문제들이
no
있는 것
compensation
같습니다.
given
그래서
to the
웹 3.0의
individuals.
이제 기본적인 핵심은
So Web
어떻게 보면 이제
3.0
데이터에 대한 소유를 개인이 가져가고
is
또
all
이제 이
about
데이터로부터
the individuals having ownership
보상을 받을
of
수
their
있는
data and
세계를
receiving fair compensation for
갖추는 게
it.
이제 웹 3.0의
So Web 3.0 is all
사상인 것
about,
같습니다.
or
이처럼
its basic principle is
기업은
about
데이터를 많이 이제
preparing
활용하려고
or
그 생존에
providing a framework
필수
for that ownership and
요소이지만 또
compensation.
이제 개인 관점에서는 이 개인
So
프라이버시
from a
정보는
personal
개인의
point of view,
소유이고 내가
our private
통제할
information
수
is
있어야
owned
된다라는
by individuals and should be
생각들을 많이
able to
가지고
be
있습니다.
controlled
근데
by
이런 생각들이
individuals.
서로 이제 상치됐을 때,
So,
배치됐을
but when
때는
these
이제
different
문제가
views of
발생이 될
companies and
수밖에
individuals
없는 것
clash,
같습니다.
there arises
이런 사례들이
problems.
굉장히 이제 많이 있죠.
So we
대표적인
see
게
many
이제
of these cases
우리나라에서도
occurring today, even in Korea.
이루다라는
There
그런
was
이제
a
그
chatbot
서비스가
named Iruda,
있었는데 이
which
서비스가
became a big
실제
social issue here in Korea.
100억 건이었나요? 뭐 수많은 이제 그
I think it was about
정보
10 billion
개인들의 이제 데이터를 가져와서 그 중에서는
personal
일부 이제
data
개인
that
정보가
it
이제 포함이 돼서
manipulated,
이슈가
which
되는
contains some really
사례들이
private and
있었죠.
sensitive
결국은
information.
이 이루다가 굉장히
So,
저도 이제 사용을 해봤는데
I actually used
잘
Iruda
만든
myself, and
서비스인
it
것
was a
같아요.
well-made
그럼에도
service.
불구하고 개인정보
Nevertheless,
이슈,
because
그리고 또
of
이제 혐오하는 뭐
privacy
이런 이슈들 때문에
issues and also hate
문을
speech
닫고
issues,
최근에 이제 다시
the company
이제
closed
오픈을
down,
했습니다.
shut down Iruda.
이런 것들이
It
이제
did recently open back up again,
개인정보의
though.
문제로
So
인해서
again,
이제 발생이 됐다라고 볼 수가 있겠고.
So that's an example
물론
of
이제
a
지능형
privacy
CCTV 같은
issue.
CCTV에서도 개인정보 이슈는
And
많이
intelligent
발생되고 있는
CCTV
것 같습니다.
systems also are related to personal
규제
information issues.
관점에서도
So from the
실제
viewpoint
이제
of
국내외에서
regulations,
이제 데이터에 대한 규제가 많이 이루어지고 있는 것 같습니다.
many
대표적인 게
regulations
이제
are being implemented
EU의
here in Korea and also
근데
globally.
EU의
One of them being
GDPR에서도
the
실제
EU's
이제
General Data
개인정보를
Protection
보호하기
Regulation,
위한
or
목적이
GDPR.
다다라고는 할 수가
But we
없습니다.
cannot
물론
say that the
그게는
sole purpose of
어떤
GDPR
기업들의
is to protect individuals'
개인정보에
privacy.
대한 관리에 대한
Of course,
굉장히 엄격한 의무를
some
주고 있고 또 이제
many companies have to
개인들한테는
oblige
또
to a
많은
very
이제 권한을 주고
stringent
있습니다.
measures of
하지만 이
protecting individual
개인정보를
information
보호하겠다라는 게
in the EU,
GDPR의
but
목적의
the
다는 아닌 것
GDPR's
같습니다.
sole purpose
실제
is
EU
not to protect those
GDPR에서는
personal information.
EU
The
영내에서
GDPR
27개국이 자유롭게 데이터를 이동시킬 수 있고
allows the 27
디지털
EU member
경제를
countries to transfer data
육성시키는
across
게 또
border,
하나의 이제
and it
큰
also aims to
목적으로
foster
자리 잡고
talents in
있습니다.
this area.
국내도 마찬가지죠.
And it's
국내도
similar here in
개인정보보호법을
Korea as
포함해서
well.
데이터 3법이 얼마
We
전
have
20년에 이제
three
개정이
laws
됐죠. 여기에도
that were amended in
개인정보를
2020
강하게 이제
with regards to
보호하는
data, including the Personal
규정도
Information
있지만
Protection
여기서
Act.
새롭게 이제
And regulations were placed
개인정보와
because of
익명정보,
these three
가명정보로
acts.
이렇게 구분을 해서
But we have
데이터를
actually
좀더
separated the
잘 활용할 수
information
있도록
into
하는
three categories: personal
발판을
information, anonymous
마련했다라고
information, and
할 수도 있을
pseudonym
것 같습니다.
information, so as to use them in different ways.
그래서 이제 앞서 이제 보신 것처럼 데이터를 바라보는 관점이
As you saw
활용을 하고자
earlier,
하는
the
관점과
way we
보호하고자 하는
view
관점이
data is
서로
different
이렇게
because
상충이 되고 있고
there's a
이걸
view
어떻게
that
하면
we should
균형을
protect
맞출
data, and there's a
거냐가
view
이제
that we
굉장히
should use data as
중요할
much
것
as
같습니다.
possible. So
그래서
to
이제
achieve a
저희
balance
이제
between the
정보보호
two is very
R&D
important.
관점에서도
So
지금
from an
많은
R&D
어떤 환경
perspective,
변화들, 사회적인,
we are trying to
기술적인,
facilitate
또는
many
이제
environmental
경제적인,
changes,
정치적인
social,
많은 이제
technological,
관점에서 변화들이
economic,
일어나고 있는데
ecological, and
거기에서 이제
political
특히 이제 데이터와
for
관련된
data.
부분들이
And
큰 부분들이 있는 것 같습니다. 그래서
yes, you see
기존에
these
이제
red circles that are
데이터를
related to
보호하기 위해서
data. So to
단순히 이제
protect
비식별화
data,
기술만 활용했다
we're
그러면
not just going to
다양한
use
어떤
de-identification
privacy enhancing
technology
technology를 도입해서
anymore, but we're going
개인정보를 보호하면서
to
활용할 수 있도록
also
하고
use
또
various
예전에는
enhancing
단순히 이제
technologies to
안전하게
further
저장하기
protect the
위한
information.
목적의
And in the
보호를
past,
했다라고 하면은
whereas
어떻게
we
하면 이
use
데이터를
protection to
안전하게
save
활용을 할 수
data,
있고
now we need
유통을
to
시킬
think
수
about how to
있을까라는
protect data
관점에서의
so that we will be able to better make use of them. So those are some of the efforts that are being pursued by Korea. And then there is also the area of artificial intelligence and quantum computer, as well as crisis and disaster management.
이런 많은 분야에서 데이터
So in various
보안이
areas,
고려가 되고
data
있습니다.
security is being considered.
그래서 이런 이제 배경에서 작년
Against this
11월
backdrop,
달에
in November last year,
과기정통부에서는
the Ministry of Science and
기술 개발
ICT
전략을 발표를
announced
했습니다.
a strategy
전략이
to
크게 이제 세
develop more
가지로 나누어지고
technologies for
있는데요.
data
첫
security.
번째 전략은
These strategies
이제
can be
기술
divided
개발입니다.
largely into
기술
three.
개발을
First of that
통해서
being the
어떤
technology
기술
development.
수준을
So through technology
향상시키겠다는 게 첫
development, it will
번째
enhance the level
전략이고요.
of data
그래서
security.
여기에는
That's the
이제
first
기반
strategy.
기술을 확보를 하고
So it's
또
about
이제
security
응용
basic
기술을
technology
개발하는
for
것을
data protection and also
목표로 하고
developing
있고. 두
application
번째
technology.
전략은
And the second
이렇게 기술이
strategy
개발됐는데 실제 시장에서 쓰이지 않으면은 아무 소용이
is
없겠죠. 그래서
about
이 개발된
being able
혁신적인
to provide
기술들을
support
시장에서 많이
so as
확산시키기
to
위한
make sure that these developed
전략들을 두 번째
technologies take
전략으로
root
이제
in the market.
삼았습니다.
In other words,
그리고 세
it
번째
doesn't matter if we just
전략에는 이 이제
develop
데이터 보호
technologies, we need to
기술이
make use of them.
장기적으로 계속 지속적으로 유지가
And
될 수
strategy
있는
3
기반을
is
조성하기
about
위한
establishing a foundation for
사업들을
continuous
진행을
growth of data
하려고
protection
합니다.
technology.
그래서 이제 요 전략이 이제 세 번째 전략이고요.
So those were the three
첫 번째 전략이 이제
strategies.
기술 개발
Now let's take a look at the first strategy more in depth.
기술 개발 쪽에는
It's
이제
about data
기반 기술을
or
확보하기
data
위해서
protection technology development, as I said
기존에도
earlier.
이제 저희가 계속 지속적으로 해왔던
And
데이터 비식별화 기술.
De-identification technology is something that we have already made use
비식별화도
of.
이제 정형 데이터뿐만 아니라 여러
But
어떤
now
그
we want to
음성이라든지
make
영상이라든지
use of
이런 이제
these
비정형 데이터 또는 이제
de-identification
반정형
technology
데이터에
to not only
대해서도
structured data,
비식별화할
but
수 있는
semi-structured data, for example, video footages and so on. So it's a technology that we have to develop a technology for pseudonymization and anonymization so that sensitive information can be identified.
그래서 그런 것들 보완하기 위해서 새로운 어떤 프라이버시 인행식 테크놀로지들이 많이 이제 도입이 되고
But it has its own vulnerabilities. So in order to enhance that technology, there is something called differential privacy technology.
것 같습니다. 그래서
It's actually one of such technology.
그대로 활용하면
So using one data set entirely on its own leads to risk of identification. So appropriate pseudo noise will be added to the data to prevent the leak of sensitive information.
또 이제 최근에 많이 그 이슈
And we talk about homomorphic encryption a lot these days.
동영암호는
It's
이제
becoming a
암호화된
heatedly
상태에서
debated
데이터를
topic.
연산할 수 있기
And
때문에
it's a cryptographic technology that can perform operations while data is encrypted, so it's very innovative.
동영암호가 이게
But
만능은 아닌 것
homomorphic
같습니다.
encryption is not perfect. There are technical limitations,
특히 이제 그 속도 문제인 것 같습니다.
especially in terms of
표본을
speed.
연산했을 때에 비해서 지금 현재 기술 수준은 최고 한 10,000배 정도 이제 느려지는 문제가 있습니다.
I think compared to existing technology, it's about 10,000 times slower, which means that something that could be operated within 1 hour would take 10,000 hours, which is equal to 27 years. So we cannot use that. So we do need to conduct research with regards to how we can decrease the data or how we can make the data smaller. So homomorphic encryption can be used together with such research efforts. And the next generation encryption technology is also being researched. For example, post-quantum cryptography or PQC. So when quantum computer is introduced, the existing encryption system can be affected, and therefore we need encryption technology that disables hacking attempts even once using quantum computers. So with regards to 4 algorithms, the Korean government has announced that we have gained a foothold in securing post-quantum cryptography. So active research and development is ongoing in Korea these days. And there's also the federated learning technology. So the data would be taken not from individual devices. So after AI learns data, it shares only the learned outcomes and not the original data. There's also the synthetic data generation technology, where a virtual data that follows the statistical characteristics of the original data would be generated. And this virtual data, from a statistical point of view, would have the same nature as the original data. So these are some of the technologies that are being researched here in Korea these days.
지금 이제 그 개인 정보를 어떤 개인의 주권, 개인의 어떤 개인 데이터에 대한 통제권을
And individual sovereignty or the rights to control one's own information is important. So related researches are also being conducted. And also technologies that can prevent and also track the information leakage for industries is also being researched as well. And data protection and convergence industry is also being closely looked at. So in various areas like IoT and smart city, digital healthcare, OT and smart factories, and autonomous driving, in these various areas, data needs to be protected, and we need to create relevant technologies for that.
현재 진행하고 있는 이제
So in terms of R&D, we have been implementing and we are carrying out many tasks related to data security. So this slide is a summary of that. So we are conducting R&D for technologies to reinforce privacy, for example.
특히 이제 뭐 속도를 높이기 위한 이제 이런 대용량 정형 데이터에 대한 비식별 기술이라든지
And we are developing technology for massive structured data, and as I said earlier, differential privacy and
지금 이제 동형 암호라든지
synthetic data generation technologies, and also post-quantum cryptography R&D is also ongoing. And federated learning in terms of encryption and cryptographic technology is ongoing as well.
연구들도 이 연구는 이제 뭐 그 정보보호 부분뿐만 아니라 이제 블록체인
These technologies relate not only to data security but also blockchain.
그리고 융합 서비스 데이터 보호를 위해서도
And
여러
we are
분야의
also conducting many R&Ds for convergence services, data protection,
스마트 공장,
and as I said earlier, medical and healthcare, smart factories, and so on.
첫 번째 전략은 이제 기술 개발을 통해서
So the
이제
first
기술
strategy
수준을
was about enhancing our technical capability through the development of new technologies. And the second technologies, as I said earlier, making sure is all about making sure that the developed technologies would take root in the market.
첫 번째 이제 그 시장 활성화를 위해서 데이터
So for market vitalization, demonstration would take
여러
place.
어떤 데이터 경제를 육성하기 위해서
In order to foster data economy, the government has conducted many pilot projects and demonstrations, one of them being My Data and Data Flagship.
이 사업들을 진행할 때 앞서 이제 소개드렸던 이제 데이터를 보호할 수 있는 기술을
And data protection or data security technologies would have to be implemented when carrying out these pilot projects and demonstrations. And once the technology is selected, incentives will be given.
그리고 이제 블록체인 쪽에서도 R&D뿐만
And
아니라
in the area of
R&D
blockchain,
영역하고 같이 해서
not just R&D but also non-R&D sectors are working together so as to
활용할 수 있도록 그렇게 진행을 하고 있습니다.
make sure that these technologies
그리고
take
이제
root in the
공공
market.
분야에서는 이제 저희가
And in
그
public
통계청하고
area,
같이
we are working
올해부터
together
진행을
with
하고
the
있는 사업이
Korea
있습니다.
Statistics.
그래서
As a matter of fact, the
통계청에서는
project began this year. So the Korea Statistics would
통계청은
use something called the K statistics system.
데이터를 가지고
So
있죠.
the Korea Statistics has massive amount of data.
이 데이터를 지금까지는 활용하는데
And
많은 이제 그 어떤 privacy issue
we
때문에
have faced
어려움이
many
있었습니다.
limitations in terms of privacy issues
지금
in
통계청하고
utilizing
같이
these
과기부가
areas.
협업해서
So the
동영암호라든지 제형
MSIT,
데이터,
together with
DT
Korea
기술,
Statistics,
이런 기술들을
is working together to
K 통계 시스템에 채용을
implement
해서 활용을 하기로
homomorphic
했습니다.
information
같이
and PQC and so on, so as to make better use of the data that the statistics,
그리고 이제
the
PQC로
Korea
이제
statistics
전환
have.
부분도
And with
그 이제
regards to
정부에서는
a
이제 여러 이제
shift
시범
towards
사업들
PQC, the Korean government has
또
conducted
적용할 수
many
있는
pilot
가이드라인,
projects,
뭐 이런 것들을
and
지금
it has
이제
developed and distributed,
준비를 하고 있습니다.
or it is preparing to develop and distribute related
마지막
guidelines.
세 번째 전략은 이제 지속적인 성장 기반 조성 부분인데요.
Now, the third strategy is about
그
creating
지속적으로 이렇게 성장하려고
a
그러면은
base for continuous growth of this industry, and
중요할 것 같습니다.
I think fostering man talent is the key here.
앞서도 이제 뭐
Fostering talent or manpower is really important, and this was mentioned in previous session as well. When we are conducting R&D,
인력 양성 사업을 하려고 할 때도 정말 이제
and
데이터
even when we are
보호와
trying to
관련된
train
인력들이
related
굉장히
talents,
부족하다라는 것들을 많이
we
느꼈습니다.
always
그래서
feel that there's
정부에서
just
하고
not
있는
enough
이제
people.
데이터 보호에 이제 특화된 어떤
So
정보보호
the
특성화
government
대학을
has designated
2개교를 이제 지정을 할 예정이고
or
또
is
이제
planning to designate
ICIS
two universities as schools that specialize in data security. And I'm sure you know the ITIC project. And this ITIC project
ITRC 학교를 한 개 기교를 이제 지정을 했습니다. 또
designated one university as a school related to ITIC. And we hope that these measures would foster more talents in this area. And for companies to easily apply these data protection technologies in compliance with government measures, we are preparing and will distribute related guidelines. And that's how their R&D activities will be supported further. And with regards to public-private R&D cooperation, we have something called the government, the R&D consultative body for national cybersecurity comprised of the MSIT, National Intelligence Service, Ministry of Defense, the Prosecution Office, and the National Police Agency and Korea Statistics. So for example, the K statistics system of the Korea Statistics is one example of an outcome from this consultative body. And also there is a public-private body of organizations with needs, and based on their needs or their demands, we will provide them with necessary support. So that was a brief presentation about our strategies to develop core data protection technologies. Thank you for listening.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you for the presentation. Now, companies want to utilize data, but the biggest hurdle to that is privacy issue. So how are we going to create a balance between two issues that clash? And he talked about technological solutions to that problems, and he introduced many different technologies like AI-based technologies, homomorphic encryption, and post-quantum cryptography, and so on. We do have some time, so I'd like to take a few questions from the floor. Do you have any questions? Yes, can you hand her the microphone? Please tell us your name and your affiliation. I'm from the Ministry of Defense, and my name is Choi In-soo. So thank you for your introduction about different strategies, but I do have a question. So if you look at page 18, with regards to homomorphic encryption, there is something called building a public big data system based on latest encryption technologies such as homomorphic encryption. And encrypted, so it's very difficult to read this encrypted data, so we usually do encryption. But are you saying that homomorphic encryption can actually just read this big public data without decryption? And what's really important is a diversity of data and structured data and non-structured data like video. How far has homomorphic encryption come in terms of its capability to deal with both structured and non-structured data? Yes, homomorphic encryption, as I said earlier, still has technical limitations, many of them, as a matter of fact. So the Korean statistics, in order to apply homomorphic encryption to its case statistics system, raised many issues, one of them being speed. So, because the speed slows down at about 10,000 times, as I said earlier, we're trying to accelerate that speed to by times 200. Then that would be enough speed to use homomorphic encryption for the data of Korea statistics. And in order to achieve that goal, we are using accelerators for not only softwares but also hardwares. And homomorphic encryption cannot be applied right away to everything. So there are many statistical models and algorithms used by Korea Statistics, so we would optimize the homomorphic encryptions to each of those algorithms, and we are trying to also come up with related compiler technologies. So videos and other non-structured data, yes, you are right. We do need more R&D efforts. Thank you very much for the answer. Does anyone else have any questions? Yes, can you hand the person on the floor the microphone? Hello, I'm from Chungang University, a student. My name is Kim Dong-hwan, and when you talked about data de-identification, I have a question regarding that. I actually work at a government agency right now in social services, and there are many sensitive information that I have to deal with in there. So there are many de-identification processes that I come across when doing my work. And because of data de-identification, there are many troubles that I run into in my data or work. There are many discomfort that arises because of de-identification. So can there be any technological or scientific alternative to these discomfort that arise from de-identification? That's a very difficult question. Yes, de-identification can create discomfort. It's very inconvenient. So KLTT and what is it again? And was it? And these such KLT models are being used for de-identification. The process of de-identification is tough and it takes a long amount of time. Most of all, after de-identification, the data is crumbled so much that we cannot use the data. So de-identification technology itself has its own limitations, and efforts are being made to overcome these obstacles so that it can be used for not just structured data but non-structured data. But I believe we cannot just use the identification technology going forward. There are many different types of technologies that are introduced in my presentation, and going forward, we will have to utilize them together with the identification. So in other words, we would have to use different technologies according to our different goals. Yes, I am aware of the inconveniences that arise from the identification, and efforts are being made, but there are limits. And with regards to anonymization, discussions are being held whether that should comply with a K3 standard or K2 standard, but it would depend on the purpose or the goal of using that data and how sensitive the information is. So it's very difficult for government to give you a solid standard. So through individual assessment, we would have to select the appropriate technology for the appropriate occasion. Yes, we are already running out of time, so thank you for your wonderful presentation and your answers. Once again, please give a big round of applause to Mr. Hyuncheol for his wonderful presentation. Now let's move on to the second presentation. Second presentation is titled Strategic Development Plans of Information Security Industry. It will be given by Mr. Dong-hwan, leader of Security Industry Division from the Korea Internet and Security Agency, or KISA. Now I'd like to invite him up to the stage. Please welcome him with a big hand. Hello, it's very nice to meet you as introduced. My name is Dong-hwan, the leader of Security Industry Division from KISA. So I will take my mask off for a better presentation. What I would like to talk about today is the strategic development plans for information security industry. And in February, the MSIT already announced this plan, or the strategic development plan. So today is the 11th Information Security Day, and it's very important for us to be reminded of the related policies of the government and the future direction that we should all take together. So that's what my presentation is about.
발표 순서는 이렇고요.
This is the order of my presentation.
이 전략적 육성 방안에 대한 이 취지 배경을 좀 말씀드리면.
So let me talk about the background of the government's decision to pursue this plan. So after the outbreak of COVID-19 in 2019, digital transformation happened at a rapid pace. And security demand also increased with that rapid transition. So in 2015, to be more exact, we created the Information Security Industry Act. And in 2026, we created the first plan for promoting the information security industry. And with that plan, we created the foothold for the government to promote the information security industry. And the second plan came up in June 2020. And in February 2021, we created the Cybersecurity promotion strategy. And from then on, we began to use digital security, the term digital security. How are we going to apply digital security and how are we going to reinforce that going forward was contemplated in earnest in February 2021. And in August 2021, we saw some ransomware incidents happening in the United States. So in August 2021, Korea came up with plans to reinforce its responses to ransomware. So for example, back up the data of SMEs to cloud and so on. So again, the plan was announced in February. By plan, I'm talking about the strategic development plans of the information security industry. And there's really no big difference between that and the other plans that were previously announced. But if there is a difference, the recent plan focuses more on the areas that we need greater improvement. So let's take a look in detail. So during the Park Geun-hye administration, the Promotion Act, the promotion plan came into light or was created, and since then, yes, our information security industry grew significantly. And the market has grown and the number of companies has grown. However, I think this is due to some special circumstances or special background. So although we have achieved quantitative growth, the government wants to take this to a level further and achieve qualitative growth. So because of digital transformation, new security markets have been created, and so the Korean government wants to be the first mover into these new markets. So the policies, related policies are about creating new markets, fostering top-tier companies in the world, and to enlarge the industry ecosystem. So if you're in this industry, whether you're in the academia, the government, or public institutions, the government policy is always about creating new markets and fostering talent and creating related ecosystem. So in creating new markets, it's about vitalizing the AI industry, it's about pioneering zero-context services, and it's about expanding the base for convergence security industry. So artificial intelligence would actively be used in the area of data security or information security. The Korean government has decided, and it would also pioneer the zero-contact service security market that came with COVID-19, and also expand the base for convergent security industry. And fostering top-tier talent or companies is very difficult. In terms of services and solutions, solutions for Korea, but I believe that in terms of part technology or component technology, there is definitely strength. So therefore, the Korean government aims to commercialize new growth in technologies, reading technologies and products, and to induce growth at scale for companies in the nascent stage of information security. And in terms of enlarging the industry ecosystem, the Korean government has made the disclosure of information security measure mandatory, and this is the only country, Korea is the only country in the world who has made this. So last year it passed a law to make sure that the companies are obliged to disclose their information security measures. I'm sure you saw it in newspaper articles as well. And from KISA's point of view, this is some very significant investments have been made after this measure, and the market has been growing qualitatively. So we are currently doing some research with this, and a related report will be released in September or October this year. So let's take a look at some key policies in detail. So in terms of fostering AI, this actually came up since last year. So to be more precise, the projects were formed based on the second plan for promoting the information security industry. And utilizing AI to be used in the security sector is basically the key. So for the next 5 years, it would discover 100 companies and support them from step up to grow up, from commercialization to global advancement. So applying AI to these products were in place since a long time ago, but what's really difficult is about the data and how it can actually be applied in reality. And so the government would provide necessary support, for example, budget, so as to further expedite such measures and efforts. And what's really important here is the third one. The third one is about the defense against AI dysfunctions. This is really important, but not many projects are being realized in this area. Many people are working to apply AI technology in the security area, but how are we going to respond to attacks by AI? So in other words, if AI acts like human beings, how are we going to make sure that the AI authenticates itself so that we will be able to differentiate between real humans and AIs? So this is a very difficult issue, and we would like to discover many projects in this area, but it's not so easy. So basically, we are identifying companies and we are commercializing them, and we are trying to find a market. We haven't entered into the finding market stage yet. So last year, for the first time ever, we applied something to these companies. So the security companies are always saddened by the fact that their valuation is actually lower than it actually is. So the valuation of security companies are actually done based on their softwares. So their value of their companies and technologies and their products is actually lower than they actually should be, because commercialization is very important, and therefore they have difficulty in raising investment. So last year we did a technology valuation, and we created a related model. So I haven't put that in my presentation, but we made the model this year, and we are going to do a pilot project so that the valuation of these security companies will be done more correctly. Actually, investment in security technology is very big in the United States, But the model is not being applied here in Korea, so we are trying to come up with our own.
올해 제품화가 만들어지면 뭐 내년도에는 저희 뭐 해외
So
본점이나
if products are made
올 연말에
this year,
캠프
we would introduce them at the
사이버 보안 협의체인데
Global Cybersecurity Camp attended by 46 countries. We would take them there and introduce the products there, and also take them to the global market next year if possible. And the zero contact service area began last year.
사실 뭐 비대면 부분에 적용되고 있는 부분은 굉장히 많습니다.
So there are many technologies that are being applied to zero contact services.
빠르게 접촉할 수 있는 부분이 어딜까라는
But there are some key areas that should be considered so as to provide faster services to our citizens. And that is zero contact medical treatment and working and education and distribution and payment.
생각보다 그렇게 큰 결과를 좀 창출하기
So these were the four main areas that we would focus on so as to provide faster and better services to our Korean citizens. So last year we selected 5 companies and we supported them. And this year, in accordance with global trend, we added metaverse. The how security-related technologies can be realized in metaverse is also being considered this year.
거기에 들어가는 보안 기능들 그리고 제공되는 서비스들을 저희가 업체를 선정을 해서 하고 있고요.
So again, we are selecting companies in these 4 fields together with metaverse this year.
어디에 있을까라고 해서 수요 업체까지 매칭을 해서 이번에
And
받았습니다.
we have also selected companies with not just who create these technologies, but companies that also have demand for these technologies, so that we would better be able to create technologies that actually meets the demand.
5G 플러스 전략을 만들면서
And in 2019, we created the 5G plus service, and related to that, this year we decided to focus on convergence security. The immersive content, smart factory, digital healthcare, autonomous driving, and smart city are the 5 areas that is related to this policy. And we created related test beds in different parts of the country. If you go to Gunsan, for example, we have a test bed for autonomous driving. And we created the security guidelines for these 5 areas, and we distributed them to related companies. And the commonality of these 5 areas is that, well, maybe immersive content is not so much, but there is no concrete or standard system. So in other words, it's very difficult to create a system or an institution for these 4 areas. So we would have to make sure that these areas are sort of immune to various government regulations. So if an autonomous driving project has shown some excellent results, for example, then maybe they would be immune to some related regulations that would be applied by a relevant ministry. So such flexibility is needed. So the flexibility, adopting that flexibility is really a key goal of this policy. And with regards to supporting technologies and products that lead new growth, that's an area of our focus. So in Pangyo, we have a security protection cluster, and KISA is conducting related projects in that cluster. We have many excellent companies that are being born out of that clusters. In 2014, I did some startup projects with Google, and it's very difficult to make a startup successful. Even with the support from Google, 2 to 3 years later, these companies disappear.
우리가 얘기하는 존 뭐라고 그러죠?
But security companies have persisted throughout hardships, and they make great amount of efforts as to how they can use the technologies and how they can quickly adapt to changing trends.
우리가 얘기하는 인터넷 서비스 부분보다 우리가 클러스터를 만들어서 판교에서 운영하고 있습니다만 그 기업들만의
So the network and collaboration that happen between companies inside a cluster is really the key.
저희가 그 키시아에서 이제 그 코로나 환경에 따라서
So together with COVID-19,
좀 더 지원할 수 있는 환경들도 좀 만들고
KISA has created an environment that would help these companies collaborate
PPT를 좀 잘못 봤네요.
online, not offline.
과기부에서 매년 이제 우수 기술을 지정하는 부분입니다.
And this slide, sorry, I was talking about a different slide just right now. And this slide is about the MSIT selecting excellent companies every year and giving them awards.
공공이나 기업에서 활용되는 부분들이 좀 적습니다.
But even when these excellent companies and technologies are selected, they're actually not being realized because of reference issues. So we're trying to work together with the national police agencies so that these selected excellent technologies would actually be applied in the field, applied in actuality.
수의계약과도 같죠. ICT 기술 마켓에 올라가면 바로 공공기관이나 이런 데서 좀 구매를 할 수 있도록.
And if these technologies go on to the so-called ICT technology market, we want to help these technologies be bought by these public organizations and government agencies. And we're also working on making efforts to promote these technologies to outside, not just government agencies. Can you please wrap up your presentation in 3 minutes? Yes, I will do that. Now, with regards to making ventures overseas, yes, it's very difficult for security companies because of COVID-19, but these days we're trying to make overseas venture again, focusing on developing countries, and we do have 5 overseas bases, and we're trying to discover or identify demands in these 5 bases so that we could help the overseas ventures of these security companies despite COVID-19. Now, we did say that the companies are obliged to make reports of their information security measures, and 598 companies are obliged to do so, and among them 582 companies made the report. So it's a very successful outcome, and as I said before, an in-depth report about the outcome of this measure will be announced in September to October. And also we have demanded that they sophisticate information security authentication process. So we have created a database and shared these threat information and malware and so on, but this is very difficult. We do need to sophisticate this going forward so that the companies can better make use of such database.
이 부분은 저희가 중소기업 전국에 10개 지역센터를 갖고 있는데
And we have about 10 regional centers across the nation. And these are some consulting services that we provide to 1,300 SMEs.
요거는 사실 오늘 이 얘기를 가장 많이 하고 싶었는데.
And this is what I really want to focus on today. So our goal is to grow this market to 20 trillion won worth market by 2025, and we would have to implement some drastic measures for this.
제가 생각하는 건 같은 회에서도 발표했습니다만
I believe that how to best utilize the existing services and products is the key. The operation technology would become the area of key focus in the security area going forward. So to that end, we will create more support programs together with the Korean government. And this project not only encompasses not just the public companies, but also the police agency, the Ministry of Defense, and so on. So instead of making advancements in the security technology going forward, I believe the key is to how to come up with ways to best utilize, best operate the existing technologies that have already been developed. Thank you very much for the presentation. Please give him another big hand. So Mr. Oh talked about the strategic development plans of information security industry. Thank you for that detailed presentation. Do you have any questions for him? Please raise your hand. Yes, please, to that gentleman over there. Please state your name and affiliation. Hello, my name is Ho Song-gun. I'm from the DS Lab company. So in your presentation, the convergence sector designates 5 areas to work on, but do you have any other areas in mind that would be part of this convergence security? The 5G plus key services cover 5 areas selected by MSIT. So yeah, support went to those 5 areas first, but KISA is actually thinking about, well, it's actually making requests to the relevant ministry to include more areas. The 5 areas will actually see the support being ended after 3 years. And after the 3-year period ends, we want to include more areas, but it's very difficult for me to specifically say what areas those are today because we do have some budget issues to consider. We haven't secured enough budget yet, but yes, we do plan to enlarge the scope of this convergence security support area. Any more questions or comments? We do have a minute left. I thought you had some more things to speak about your presentation, right? But we were slightly tight on time. But anyway, today is the 11th Information Security Day. And the 11th Information Security Day was a celebration by the government and the public sector actually to commemorate their efforts for information security. But I believe that going forward, it's very difficult to expand the security area in the public sector going forward. And verification and make them into policies is very difficult. So second service, we would like to provide them to government agencies, but verification is very difficult. But now going forward, the security products in the private sector would have to enhance competitiveness. In order to do so, it's difficult to do that with individual companies working alone. You know why? There are many more various services that are being provided by foreign companies. So if we want to enhance our own competitiveness, it doesn't have to be in the form of an M&A between companies, but there should be a M&A between technologies and make them into platforms, take them to platforms. And if we can do so, the market can grow exponentially. So KISA is always thinking about how best it can support such efforts. So let's do this together. Let's study this together so that we would actualize it. That's my personal goal, as a matter of fact. Thank you very much for that great comment. Please give him a big hand. That concludes 2 presentations in Track B. We did take questions from the floor after each presentation. I believe that many people here today are from the private sector. And as said by the presenter, in order to make a significant leap forward in the security area, we would like to see more collaboration between government and private sectors, and also between private sectors going forward. So that concludes this session, and I will now pass on the microphone to the MC. Thank you very much. Please give another big round of applause to the moderator and the two presenters for their wonderful presentation. Track B of ICIS 2022 will now finish. Please do go to Track A and Track C for the afternoon session that will begin at 2:30 p.m. Lunch will be provided from 1 p.m. Right now it's 12:34, so please go outside and take a look at the various booths and exhibitions outside the hall and come back to Track B at 1 p.m. and lunch will be provided. And after lunch, the Track B session is only for people from government agencies. It will be given by the National Intelligence Service, and we ask for your understanding. So please do make use of this event hall until 2:20, and after that we would have to respectfully ask you to leave. So please enjoy your break, enjoy your lunch, and we will see you back.